My new book, Pillars for Life, A Guide to Spiritual Ethics and Practice, is now out and available for you to read and purchase. You can check out our website, willowhealing.org, to find a link, or you can find it on Amazon. We look forward to getting your feedback, and if you love it, please leave a review and share with your friends. Now it's time for the show. Welcome to Willow Healing Matters, the podcast. We are so excited to have you joining us on this journey where we explore different ways to empower your soul, whether it's healing in your kitchen or all the way up in the corporate world. Come with us as we look into different ways to heal your mind, body, and soul. Hey everyone, it's Catherine from Willow Healing, and today I have with me the wonderful Elizabeth Bruckner. So she is the author of The Homesteader Mindset, a book that will transform the way you view self-sufficiency and give you the tools and practical tips needed for a more meaningful life. Elizabeth's book has quickly become a must-need for every person who dreams of creating sustainable living through traditional skills and common sense. She holds a Master of Science in Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine. She empowers her patients utilizing the five-element theory of traditional Chinese medicine and the power of habit creation. Elizabeth's groundbreaking methods in self-development for the mind and body have been incorporated by a wide spectrum of budding homesteaders and wellness seekers. And you can find out more at her website, which we'll go into later. But a big welcome to the show, Elizabeth.
Thank you for having me, Catherine. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm excited to hear about this book. It's just like ticking all my boxes. So so tell us a little bit about what it's about and how like it all came together.
Absolutely. So, my book, The Homesteader Mindset, helps busy people tackle the overwhelm of creating a sustainable, healthy lifestyle through the implementation of tiny daily habits. That's it in a nutshell. How did this come about? Well, I became an accidental homesteader. So I probably should take you back to what a homesteader is, and then I promise I will tell you how I accidentally became a homesteader. A lot of people in America, when we think of homesteading, it's become a trendy term. So more people are understanding what the term is, but still a lot of people think that homesteading is ma and pa kettle, like you make your own clothes and you fight off bears with a rifle and you have a pitchfork. Now I do have a pitchfork in my house, not in my house, in my garden shed, but I don't fight off bears and I definitely don't make my own clothes. I've tried fixing a hole on one of my husband's flannel pajamas, and he was like, please never do that again. I don't know how I messed that up, but it's very possible. So that's not my homesteading venture. But a lot of people think that it's this back to earth, completely off grid. It's just you and your family, or just you alone in a cabin in the woods. And that can be homesteading. But homesteading has many aspects. There's many spokes to the wheel. So the initial homesteading was started in around 1862, a little bit before that, but that was when the first Homesteading Act occurred in America. And what that did was the federal government granted 270 acres of federal land to private owners. A lot of rich people got richer, but there were a few of us that got to have 40 acres and a mule, and they got to start their world. And that's where people think of this mom and pop kettle. Homesteading now it's it's an intentional way of living. So it's got the traditional skills, and it's got the connection to land, and it's got a mindfulness practice in it, but it can be anything. I live in the suburbs in a house with air conditioning and heat and a pool in the back, and I am a homesteader because I do several of the homesteading things. So that's like the difference between now and then. How I became an accidental homesteader is in 2020. So I was recovering from a chronic illness, which left me bedridden for weeks, homebound for months, and unable to work for years. Most of my 40s was sick. I was getting well. And it was a real game changer for me because I come from a family of workhorses. Like, you just push your body, you just do, you get it done. And my body said, no, that's not what we're going to do anymore. And you're going to respect me and you're going to take care of me. And so I started dabbling in things that were homesteading, but I didn't know what they were. For example, that's when I became crazy about fermentation. I love fermentation. That's why I'm called the fermentation maven, because I give lots of talks on fermentation. And so as a healthcare practitioner, I was really interested in the science behind fermentation. For example, in 1 teaspoon of homemade sauerkraut, you have more probiotics than a $58 bottle of the probiotics that you buy at the fancy health food store. That blew my mind. And it tastes delicious. So that was the first step. Then 2020 came and everything shut down. And I come from a family of war refugees, and I've been reminded of what it's like to be in a place where there's no food on the shelves. I went to visit Russia. My family's from Belarus, but they were under the USSR. And I went to visit Russia just at the fall of the Iron Curtain in my teens on a student exchange. And I remember seeing these gigantic stores that were empty. There was like one piece of bread and I didn't comprehend it, but it was in my brain for the rest of my life. And when I went to the store in 2020 and the shelves were empty and I couldn't get organic garlic and organic ginger, I panicked. That was my first. I was like, this is not good. My DNA kind of clicked on, like, we're in trouble. Whoop, whoop, whoop. The alarm started sounding. I went home
Yeah.
and I told my husband, like, I don't know what's going on here, but it doesn't feel good. And he said, well, why don't we try growing our own food? You're home, you're getting better. Why don't you try growing food? And I said, have you met me? Like, we've been married for, over a decade and a half. Do you know who you're talking to? Like, I was the woman that would go to the garden store and say, please, can you give me something that won't die? And then I would bring it back to the house and I would promptly kill it in about 2 weeks. And then I'd go back to the garden store and I'd bring the dead plant back. Like, tell me what I did. And they just be like, you didn't water it. Like, you need to, all these little things that I just had no idea. And so I thought, well, challenge accepted. The prescription to anxiety is action. And so I knew that if I had this fear, one of the best ways to step out of it was to move through it. And so I started learning. I went online and I found out that YouTube was something that's not just for makeup tutorials, because I thought it was cat videos and makeup tutorials before I started learning languages. I didn't know that it was useful. And so when I started looking at gardening, people kept mentioning homesteading, fermentation, getting back to traditional skills, reducing the toxic load in your home. All of this fell under the umbrella of homesteading. And so I thought, well, I guess I'm a homesteader then, because now I'm composting and I'm using my dog's poo to create fertilizer, which can be very healthy fertilizer for trees later. So I'm closing these loops so that things aren't going to the landfill. And with that, the book was born. Now, one of my friends has so aptly told me, you love to teach what you learn. And it's true. If I learn something, and I think it's good, I want all the world to know it. And so I felt that homesteading, from a habit formation, routine formation, kind of spectacles, is different than a book that teaches you how to garden, a book that teaches you how to compost. This book is teaching you how to create the skills and the routine that will seem effortless for you so that you can have a homesteading life without the pain.
Yeah, because a lot of the time, I know personally when people are like, oh, yeah, I make sourdough, and I'm like, because sourdough needs that love and care, right? That's not my thing. I don't have,
Mm-hmm.
it's really not. And it's so funny because my husband, he doesn't mind cooking. He's like, he's the gardener in our family. He grows all our fruit and our veggies and everything. But even he saw like how long it took to make sourdough, and that you have to feed it and nurture it and all these things. And he's like, oh, this isn't for me. And we have this beautiful organic sourdough that we can go buy from the shops near us. We're like, okay, that's something that we will just buy, right? And
Yes.
it's about having that balance and knowing, and for me, I'm like, just see how it feels when you pick it up. And I know it sounds really weird, but it's the energy people put in it when they make it too, because
Yes.
so often if people are angry when they make something, it's not going to feel as good as when something's really happy. So even if you're buying organic fruit and vegetables because you can't grow them yourself, just tune into what it feels like. And people are probably listening going, really? But it's true. Like, I will purposely reach for like a punnet of strawberries or something like that because, and say, oh no, these ones feel nicer. And it's because everything's energy, including our food that we eat. And I love that you took all those things, those little, bits that, and turns that fear into action. Because
Yes.
exactly like you said, if you sit in that fear, it will just stew and grow and grow and grow, and it won't let you shift out of that anxiety mindset.
That's right. I love you. We really are kindred spirits because so much of what you said, I was like, yes, me too. I was just going to tell you that I've never made sourdough and I don't have any intention to make sourdough bread. I thought about it because everyone bought a bread maker during the pandemic. Like that was the thing. So I bought one. I'm like, I'm going to make bread. And then we continued to go to a farmer's market. That's how we vote with our dollars. It's a way to stay connected to people that are actually growing our food. So if you're not able to grow your food, start with a farmer's market. And we found a baker that's like the sweetest guy. He owns his own small business, and he has a wife that helps him. And then he also has two twins, like just lovely little family. And their sourdough, I don't have gluten at this moment in my healing journey, but my husband does. And he does a 48-hour ferment. And so for those of you that aren't quite sure what we're talking about, what happens with sourdough is the culture in it actually pre-digests your bread. It eats some of the bread and it makes it easier for you to ingest. So if it's a 48-hour ferment, it's been digested much longer. For example, your homemade kefir, which I just gave some to my friend and taught them how to do it. If you ferment it commercially, usually it's like 2 to 4 hours of fermentation. So it's not really breaking down as much. But if you ferment it at home for 48 hours, which I don't know if you can see, but there's a ferment behind me that's cooking right now, which means it's just sitting on the table doing its own thing. It will break down the lactose and the casein. So lactose is what everyone says they're intolerant. A lot of times it's just an unhealthy gut. But if your lactose is broken down, you can digest it better. And casein is a protein that sometimes is difficult. So you might be casein intolerant. And then once you have something that's truly fermented, not commercially fermented, it's easier. Now, one more thing before we go on, because I loved what you said about you pick up strawberries and you feel them. Everyone's intuition is different, right? I'm very visual when I'm doing things intuitively. So I make my shopping at the farmer's market for my fruit, specifically and my veggies, I make it a meditation. And I do that and just like I stand back, I make sure my sunglasses are off so I can really see the colors. And for me, it's not a tactile feeling, it's not a sensation. It's this peach looks more vibrant than that peach, and it might have
I love
a
that.
blemish on it, or but that peach is calling to me, and so that's what I do. And I think even in my acupuncture practice, when you've been doing points for years and years and years, you're not thinking logically about it, you're seeing the points come up. And yes, it's
Yeah.
intuition, but it's also your body has just recognized these patterns. And so when you feel that, like if we want people to be a little more sciencey because they're like, no, intuition, that's crazy, I'm not going to buy my tomatoes by intuition. Okay. However, you're like I do, but it's okay. You be you. But what is that intuition sometimes in the Western world? I kind of theorize that it is an unproven theory that it's our bodies, our brain's way of making patterns. So the brain is fantastic at figuring out patterns. This looks like a healthy baby. That doesn't look like a healthy baby. You can see your kid coming home from school and you can go, something's not right. Maybe they're slightly more pale,
Mhm.
and you're not saying it's they're more pale. That's we would call that intuition. Like something's not right. My mama sense is telling me that something's wrong with my baby. And then you can go into later logicking out what's going on. I think the same is true of holding strawberries and going, does this feel good? Does this not feel good? You have an innate resourcefulness in you. It's amazing what our body can tell us when we quiet down. And so I just love that you brought that up.
Yeah, and I'm glad you did because I like that you see the energy of it too because that's such an important thing because we all tap into things differently, exactly
Yeah.
like you said, and each we all unique and have those different feeling. And I can guarantee anyone listening to this will have gone to get, the cheese off the shelf or the carton of milk and missed the first one or missed the second one, and for some reason have pulled the one from the back, or for some reason have gone, oh, not that one. I actually want this one today. And you don't even think about it. You just do it. And, unless you're in a hurry, because it's normally when you're in a hurry that you put, just throw everything in the trolley. And then all of a sudden you're like, why did I buy that? And,
Mm-hmm.
even though it might have been on the list, it didn't feel right when you got it home and you went to consume it. So everyone's probably had that experience who's listening because it just happens so much. And exactly like you say, especially a mother's intuition, like you just know something's going to happen and you're like, huh, I'm just gonna go check their room because they're being incredibly quiet. And then you see like the tap on in the bath and the sinks overflowing. Like,
Mhm.
okay, all right, we need to pull this back a little bit. Like I know you haven't filled the water, but we don't flood the bathroom. So it's just about
Mhm.
really trusting what comes through and how that intuition comes up for you. So I love that you had like this fermenting gut. So what are you actually growing in your garden? I'm just curious.
In my garden. So I took a hiatus this winter. And I say that because I've ignored my garden for about 8 months, which is usually that's deadly. Like that's not what you're supposed to do as a gardener. But I was writing my book, I was finishing the book, and I just was like, okay, you be wild, go and be fruitful. And it turns out my garden was quite fruitful because I do something called permaculture. Now, I'm not trained in permaculture, like that you can get a certification. And I'm done with grad school. Like, no more tests for me, no more quizzes. If someone can give me a certification where I just show up and learn and not have to get tested, I'll do it. So that's a shout out to any permaculturists that are listening. But permaculture is a version of creating a system in your garden or your yard that mimics nature. For example, I
Mm,
have a mango tree, and then under my mango tree, the mango tree is going to provide mangoes, but it's also providing a little bit of shade for my sorrel, which is it's kind of like a spinach, but it's perennial. It just keeps growing. You never have to plant it again. And my lemon balm. So I would say right now, if I were to go out and count my vegetables and my food, I probably have about 30 things that are still surviving, even though I haven't done anything in
mm,
many months. I just planted some marigolds, which are also edible, and you can put them in your salads or in your water, and like an infusion. And my mint is
it's a
doing
great
really
tea as
well.
well.
It's so great. Lemon verbena. That's I probably one of these days have to do a video where I just take a tour of my garden, because there's two things that I'd want to show to gardeners everywhere, to those beginners that are afraid. The first would be that my garden is messy and it's okay, because that's who I am when I garden. I don't have these well manicured, it's just too much for me. And the second thing is the resilience of the garden. There is such incredible abundance in nature. And I don't think I tapped into that until I started gardening. I've been told there's abundance and it can come to you, and here it is. You just have to, pluck the fruit of whatever you want. And I'm like, okay, that sounds great, but I don't know how that's going to happen. But then when you're sitting in the garden and you let a carrot go to seed, and from one carrot there are thousands of seeds, and from, like, let's say 9,000 seeds, 3,000 of those could become plants because some of them aren't viable.
Mm.
That's abundance. And then I can give those seeds to my friends, and then they can throw some seeds on their ground and they can have abundance. That's where it really kind of woke me up to the incredible possibilities when we're connected to our earth.
Yeah, we had that happen with our tomatoes. They took over the garden. Like they just went crazy. Not as much this year, but last year. And they were just everywhere. And, my husband's there going, maybe I planted too many. I was like, yeah, but how did we know we were going to, and we were giving away like boxes of green tomatoes because we just had so many. And this year we didn't have as much of a harvest, but this year all the animals figured out we had tomatoes. So we had these little parrots coming to eat them. We had the
Wow.
wallabies and the kangaroos eating it. This is Australian problems, right? And
Yeah.
it's like, at the same time, it's like, okay, well, that's a good lesson on how to let things grow. Like even something jumped into where our lemon tree was and started eating these beautiful lemons that we had ripening on the tree, and we're like, what on earth is eating lemons? Like, and but like you said, then you get this abundance of seeds and it's so beautiful. Even like potatoes, you just keep a couple of potatoes that are sprouting and you plant them and then you've got a potato plant. It's like, and people are like, there was a big thing here where the spinach was an issue. And I'm like, I don't know what you're complaining about. Spinach is one of the easiest things to grow. You just kind of throw in the seeds and let them go. Like
Hmm.
they purely are like that because they're almost like a weed, if you will. And I don't believe in weeds, but, they grow like that. They grow
Hmm.
really quickly, you know. And I like that you brought up marigold because bees need food too. And if you want
Yes.
to, I think that's such an important thing. If anyone wants a successful garden, you need to have pollinating plants. Like you need
Mm-hmm.
to have things that bees can come to, because if you have lots of bees and butterflies and those beautiful bugs in your garden, it's such a powerful thing, you know. And if you're ever curious, like, oh no, but the aphids are taking over, it's like, well, then you want to plant things that attract ladybugs, because the ladybugs eat the aphids. Like nature has this built in beautiful cycle of bugs that eat other bugs, but you just have to let them be. And if you keep spraying or you keep trying to put things to deter them, they're just going to keep coming because there's nothing, you're actually upsetting the cycle of what needs to happen. And you know, there's such simple remedies, you know, like there's I don't know if you've seen the one with the beer for the slugs, and you put there's like a jar you put in the ground and you put beer in it, and apparently the slugs will be attracted to that instead of your vegetables. There's so many of these little remedies and cool little things you can do, and it just helps not kill the pests, but actually deter them from eating the things that you don't want them to eat.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I love that you mentioned the tomatoes because, okay, I'll give a little recipe for a listener that wants to ferment. If you take tomatoes, onions, and you can do a pepper. You can do it from your garden, or if you have a neighbor that has grown too many tomatoes, then go get their tomatoes. You chop them up, just dice them up, throw them in a jar, and then fill the jar with a little, well, just sprinkle a lot of salt to make it really salty. You can ferment your salsa. And so what will happen is your salsa will remain wonderful for months in your fridge.
Mm.
So what I do is if I get a bunch of tomatoes, like I again, messy gardener, so I won't really trim my tomatoes. I'll just let them grow into this big monster. I've had a tomato plant be taller than me and people are like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "It's fun. I want to see where it goes." And then I will just make a ton of fermented salsa. And I'm not a big salsa person. I wasn't born and raised in Southern California. It's a big deal here. Like people put salsa on eggs. I'm four square against that, but some people are loving it, and my friends and family love it. So I make it, and then I know that it's a probiotic rich food on top of that. So I just love that. Also, I
Mm.
love what you're saying about insects. I think we've become in the Western culture, we've become so sterile. We're so afraid of things landing on us. Like, get barefoot, go out into your garden, let a worm or a caterpillar crawl over you. It's beneficial to you. They have beneficial bacteria as well. And they do balance each other out. And they do things that you don't even understand. Like ants, everybody thinks ants are terrible. Ants out of balance are not that fantastic, but in balance, they aerate your soil. What that means is they create tunnels that will then actually loosen up the soil and help your plants grow better, because the plants are like, oh, I can move my roots in here. I can get in deeper. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that you brought up ants. So I have a fun ant story. So
Tell me.
friends of ours, they always have these ants coming in the kitchen. And so so the husband weirdly, and he goes to the ants, right? I'm going to leave you the crusts of my daughter's homemade sourdough, right? Of the toast with the honey on it. I'm going to leave it for you, and you have an hour to eat it, and then you got to get gone. So we had this full conversation with the ants, and every day that's what they did. They left this little bit of tribute for the ants. They come and eat it, and then they were gone after the hour. And I was like, oh, I'm going to try that. So I tried it, and it didn't quite work that way. But then what my son and I started to do was go like put things in the garden to honor the garden and just be very like attached with like nature and things like that, and go and honor it. And the ants disappeared. We didn't do anything different. Like we tried so many other things. We put like, you know, we used borax, we tried the, you know, black pepper, we tried peppermint, we tried all these things, and they just wouldn't go away. And all we did was go and honor the garden, and they just stayed out. It was so interesting. And you know, for me, like if you keep seeing a pest, or not a pest, I don't like the word pest, but if you keep seeing an insect keep coming back into your life and not disappear, ask what it means. And all you
Mm.
have to do these days is go into Google and go spiritual meaning of ants, or spiritual meaning of caterpillars, or spiritual meaning of slugs, and see what comes up, because often it's nature having a message for you too.
Mm.
And if you let your garden grow, you'll have things grow in your garden that you never planted. And And it's always for you. So we had this happen to us, and I was studying herbology at the time, herbalism, and this beautiful big plant came up in our garden, had a really long stalk and a yellow flower up the top. And I was like, what is that? And I open up, because this is the universe, right? I open up my notes, and it's like agrimony. And it was exactly that plant. So and I was like, what does agrimony do? And it's really beneficial for the liver. And I was like, oh, I have liver issues. So then I went out, and it was perfect timing too, because it was the right time to pick the leaves so that they're not as bitter and everything. So I went and did that, and I dried it out, and people were like, oh, that sounds like effort. No, you just put it on like one of those cookie cooling racks, and you just leave it. And that's all you got to do. That's how you dry them out, really.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just put it in a dry place or in the sun. And then I had agrimony tea, and I was just like,
Wow.
wow, this is really cool. But if you we're so trained to have, like you said, these manicured gardens and these
Mm-hmm.
manicured lawns, and it has to look a certain way. Our garden is wild, and the things that we have come up, because my husband and I, like, we want to keep it as natural as possible to keep the insects. Like, we have grasshoppers, we have crickets, we have, everything you can imagine. They're living in the garden because, and then we have all these nature, like natural things come. Yes, they eat our veggie patch, but at the same time, we wouldn't have it any other way, because we love seeing the kangaroos, and we love seeing, the wallabies and everything like that come as well. But it's about finding that balance, right, between
Yes.
yourself and your garden and nature.
Yeah. And also you're mentioning a great deal. You said respect. And I think that's something that we've tend to forgotten. Instead, we're looking at a garden almost like it's a slave to us or it's a tool. And I think that the garden is so much more. In permaculture, we talk about stacking functions, which means everything has more than one function. We as humans have stacking functions for the garden. We're there to observe, we're there to clean up when there's an imbalance, we're there to plant, we're there to share some of our waste and make it into compost for fertile ground. And the garden is also there to do several things for us. One is nourish the body, also nourish the mind, right? Because if you're out in the garden, you're thinking about problem solving, you're getting more connected to nature, you're coming up with better theories. I am not one of those people that puts a podcast on while I'm in the garden. I want to be talking to my plants. I want to hear the thoughts that are meant to be heard. And then spiritually, it lifts your spirit to be in a garden. And so that's just from the three levels, but there's so many levels to how a garden can help you if you respect it. It's a relationship. This is a relationship just like any other
Exactly.
relationship.
Yeah, and I love that how you phrase that too, because often when I'm teaching clients, like, and I bring up meditation, they're like, I'm like, do you like gardening? Yes. I'm like, go into the garden and just be stillness, and because meditation is about getting that quiet state of mind, right? And if for you
Yes.
it's gardening and connecting with nature that way, you're going to get more creative flow and input doing that than sitting there trying to, quiet your mind and be in a quiet room or whatever it might be, because all of us connect different ways. And it's very much like the garden, very much like your gut, very much like how we treat our bodies and everything. We're all unique. So find the unique way that works for you.
Yes, I love that because I do think that the idea of meditation can be a bit scary for some. And it goes right back to your mindset, right? The homesteader mindset. How do you become a homesteader? You do it in small, tiny increments and you find out what works best for you at this moment. So someday you might, for instance, have 5 acres. You might have 40 acres and a mule. Who knows? But at this point, maybe you live in an apartment and you only have a windowsill. Then I recommend, but you want to start homesteading, then I recommend go to the grocery store or the farmer's market and buy a potted plant of basil and start nurturing that basil on the windowsill. You have now started homesteading. You've started doing it from something tiny. Another thing that I love to talk about in terms of creating things that you want in your life. So you have a big picture, but you have no idea how to get there. And what happens typically, at least for me, and I think that it's happened for definitely for my patients and for others that I've talked to, is that you have the picture in your mind and then you're like, this is such a big, huge undertaking. Forget it. I'll just watch TV. Like I'll just watch TV. But instead, what I say is I never call it meditation, but it is. I recommend that you daydream for 5 minutes. Just sit down with a piece of paper and go, okay, what do I want? Well, those two ladies on that beautiful podcast were talking about sourdough, and they both don't want to do sourdough, but I would love to be putting my hands in the dough. I'd like to get that little stamp that makes the leaves, the leaf prints or whatever
Yeah.
on the bread. I would love to be fancy. I'd love to get an apron that's all dusty with flour. Okay, but it just seems so overwhelming. Well, then sit for 5 minutes and just daydream about it. What does that look like to you? What does it smell like to you? What's happening? Is it, do you see that your child comes in and says, Mama, can I please have a slice of bread with some butter? Do you see yourself putting the butter on the bread and it melting into start there? And that's where you can start going, oh, well, maybe the first thing I can do is get a podcast on baking. And maybe I can, I have that friend that does sourdough. Maybe I can ask her to come over for tea and start showing me things. And you start getting more creative thought just by getting quiet. But you don't have to call it meditation, although it is. I trick people into meditation all the time. Like acupuncture is meditation. Like people are like, can I watch TV? No, you need to mellow. And it can put you into a meditative state. But you can do that with all things, and you can call it daydreaming, or you can call it gardening.
Exactly, exactly. And I love that point too, because it's just, it's like tapping into your vision and why you keep doing what you're doing. And if you don't have a dream or a vision, the best quote I heard, if you don't have a dream or a vision, you're going to end up living someone else's. So why
Oh,
not make it your own? Because
mm-hmm.
if you don't have an idea of where you're heading, where your compass is pointing, and it's funny because I ran like this masterclass last night, and that was very early on in the piece. I'm like, let's tap in. What is your actual vision? Because otherwise, none of this is going to land for you. You're not going to see
Mm-hmm.
where you can, you know, foster this and where it can go. Because if you don't have that, and your vision can change, and that's okay. Like you said, for you, homesteading might have been, oh, I have to make sourdough. But then when you sat there, you're like, no, that one's not for me. Instead, I'm going to ferment because I love fermenting, and it's whatever
Mm-hmm.
aspect. But then that's why it's so important then to build that community as well. Because if you can find other people doing things, like Joe might be really good at growing carrots, but he's terrible at tomatoes. But we've got a ton of tomatoes. So let's create a little community there and swap that abundance, because then we're going to, both be nourishing each other. And this is what people used to do.
Yes.
And we've forgotten that that's what it is, because we were replaced with the convenience of a supermarket. And we all know now the supermarket isn't necessarily the best place to get your food.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. And it's
Yeah.
not the most spirit nourishing either, right? There's fluorescent lights. You don't really know the checker unless you live in a tiny town. But I love knowing the people. I like being on a first name basis with someone that provides me with fruit. And I often will say to them, I don't do it every time because then it would be kind of hokey and routine, but I will often say, thank you for feeding my family. And you can see the farmers stand up a
Mm.
little taller and like, you're welcome. Thank you for feeding my family, because we're having an exchange of goods for money. So I love that you're mentioning that. And I will say that a lot of people tend to float through life, and there's kind of ideas of what they would like, but they're not really able to conceptualize it. And I say that's where the rubber hits the road, is knowing what you want. And one of the ways that you can do that, and I do think that this is a huge part of a healthy lifestyle, is having community. And how do you get community? It's really hard to get community. You have to be intentional about it. And so I have several ways that I do it. I'd love to hear some of the ways that you do it, Catherine, because you are definitely just from the talk that we had before the podcast, you are definitely a community creator. And people often say to me, like, how do you do that? And it's like gardening. You just plant lots of seeds. So when I take my dog for a walk, if I see someone out in the garden, I will always say hello. Even if I'm busy, I'll keep walking if I have to go. But if they have a beautiful garden, I'll be like, oh my gosh, I love it. And, do you have anything that I can propagate? So for those of you that don't know what propagate means, it's you clip off a piece of certain plants, you stick it in water, it grows roots, and then you now have a free plant. And so I have a lot of gardener friends in the neighborhood that will like leave me stuff on my porch. Like, oh, I know she would love a propagation of
Thank
this.
you.
Yes, and I'll also text my friend. I have one friend that started as a neighbor, and I'm like, are are your kumquats in season right now? And she's like, yeah, and I'm leaving on vacation. Do you want some? I'm like, give me all of them. I will eat them until my lips burn off because they're so good. And I do the same. Like we find ways that we can share, but you won't create community unless you're intentional about it. And then find groups that have like similar interests. Find the, if you really want sourdough, then farmers market will often have a demo or there'll be a baker and you ask the baker, how did you learn how to, and then you can go to a class and then you'll meet other people that want to do sourdough or want to raise chickens in their backyard or want to grow organic food. Like there's other people out there that want community just as much as you, but you have to get out of your house in order to find it.
100%. And sometimes you have to take the actions. It's like someone said to me, if you want to meet other people surfing, then go surfing,
Mm-hmm.
because you're not going to find them sitting at home, right? You're actually going to find them at the beach with their surfboards because that's where you're going to find that community. You go to where they are. Or like you said, you can create community. So my thing that I do is I connect with strangers every day. Every day I connect with strangers. I'm getting very good at connecting with strangers, and I'll just strike up. And even, it sounds like an act of kindness, but I don't like acts of kindness. Just be kind, people. But, it's just like I will see somebody and I'm like, I really like your shirt, or like, I really like your dress. Or the other day I saw someone with this vibrant pink purple hair, like it made me think of a mermaid. I was like, I love your hair. And she's like, oh, thank you so much. And and that could be the gateway into a conversation as well. Or, if you can see someone struggling for community and someone else, this is what I love too. I love connecting people, and I love bringing people together. So, for example, especially through my podcasting and things like that, I meet so many beautiful people around the world. And sometimes I'm like, you sound a lot like this guest. Would you be open to being connected with each other because you both have the same mission and the same thing you want to do? And then because I'm not on vibe with that, but I know those people are, and then you can help them make that connection.
Mm.
And that is an amazing thing that you can do as a human, is help create that bridge of connection between people, because then it's creating a new community in itself, and it's without you even having to do much apart from, oh yeah, I interviewed someone, they said almost the same things as you did, I want to keep you guys and get you guys together. So that is the magic of when you talk to strangers and you be really open with them, and be a bit vulnerable. Sometimes you
Mm-hmm.
just have to lay it on the line and throw out the seeds. And if it doesn't land, it doesn't land. It doesn't mean they don't like you. It just means that they're not your vibe. They're not your
Mm-hmm.
tribe. They're not your vibe. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love this. I'm so glad you brought up because you did mention it before the podcast, the speaking to new strangers. I love that because you do create
Yeah.
community that way. I I'll even go a little further in that I've been experimenting with receiving, like energetically receiving. So before I go to a gathering, I'll just be like, I'm going to receive. I'm just going to, and I think again, for those that are very Western minded, like, what is she talking about? I'm just getting in the mindset of there's goodness that's coming. And so I start looking for the goodness. And so I start seeing the goodness. There's a very wise person that says, when you focus on the solution increases. So by this idea of I'm going to receive, that you start noticing like, oh, I am receiving. And there are two stories that
Yeah.
happened on Saturday. Number one, I'm just receiving goodness. And what can I do in the farmer's market that can help me be more present and more awake and more ready to receive? And so one was, there was a musician playing. And so I stopped and listened. And then it brightened my day. And then I walked on and someone came up to me and said, what a beautiful scarf you have on. And I was like, oh, thank you. And I just like, oh, thank you. I'm receiving. I don't have to say I got this on sale or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to qualify it. Like, this is a beautiful scarf and thank you for noticing. And so when we start gaining that ability to receive, we can then easily give, because it's like the seeds in the garden. When you have thousands and thousands, it is so easy to share.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's funny because I've talked about this on another episode where we talk about the act of receiving, because so often we'll just, brush off a compliment, or we actually just generally don't take it in. And I used to be guilty of that. Someone would
Yeah.
say, I really like your dress. And then I'd give them the whole backstory of where I got it, or that I got on sale, or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually, you're not actually taking in the energy of receiving. And sometimes just to go, thank you. It's like, thank you for seeing me, or thank you for acknowledging me.
Mm.
It can be really, really powerful. And thank you for bringing that up too, because especially with the garden, you have to be open to receiving. Otherwise, you're never going to get anything out of it.
That's exactly right. And that goes back to some of the awakenings that I had in my 40s. So when I got too sick to work and to do things, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I need to be giving. I need to be the workhorse that I grew up to be." And what I learned was my body was like, "No, you need to learn how to receive." And so I hope that if anyone here is listening and they're not yet receiving, do it before your body says you have to stop. Like you don't have to learn the way that I learned, which was, I woke up and my 40s were gone because I was too ill and I had to receive help from my husband. And now I'm much softer with that. Like I love to give. I actually have a very generous nature, but I also really enjoy receiving now because I realize that I'm blessing someone else with the opportunity to be of service. So when I'm having a difficult time and I need a little help and I call a friend and ask for help, they're gifted with the opportunity of being of service in their community. And it's a powerful, profound gift that I'm giving them. Whereas before I used to radiate, but I never received. And what happens is you run out of steam. You're a human being. You have to accept in order to give. You have to give in order to receive. It's a cycle. And if you stop that cycle, illness occurs because it's just like we said with the beautiful ants and the aphids. It's an imbalance if you're not taking care to give and receive.
Exactly. That's such a beautiful example of the balance that you need in so many different aspects of your life, but definitely with giving and receiving. And, when you are giving, it's not in the, you can't go with the mindset, if I give this, then I'm going to get something back, or then they owe me a favor. That is tainted giving. Just give for
Mm-hmm.
the sake of giving, and receive for the sake of receiving, not like
Mm-hmm.
I owe you and you owe me and that sort of thing. It's
Mm-hmm.
different, if you take turns shouting coffee or something like that. That's
Yeah.
different because that's just, being having fun and taking turns. But at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, sometimes you just genuinely want to buy someone a coffee or whatever it might be, and it's there's no reciprocation expected, and that is when the true beauty of giving comes in.
Mm-hmm.
So I know we could talk all day, but we need to start to wrap up. So how I asked the guests that come on the show, Elizabeth, if there's something they could heal or change in the world, what would it be?
This is going to be a little heavy, but I would say if I could heal one thing in the world, it would be self violence. If those of us could practice nonviolence, non judgment, humility, surrender, unconditional love, and unquestioning faith, the world would be a better place. And I say this because, yes, there's violence to others, but the violence starts with ourselves. And that can come in the form of judgment. I'm not doing this good enough. I need more. I deserve more. It could be entitlement, but it's still violence. Or it could be the opposite, where I don't deserve anything. But that violence creates more violence. It ripples out into the world. So if we could practice nonviolence with ourselves, oh my goodness, imagine the abundance of goodness that we could give to others.
Yeah, it's beautiful because sometimes we're our own worst critic, right? And we really
Yes,
need to pull ourselves out of that because, and give ourselves some compassion and some love, like you said, unconditional love and unconditional faith, because it's when we can trust ourselves and not beat up on ourselves that we can make significant changes in this world and let that ripple out.
absolutely.
Yeah. And where can people find your book and find you, Elizabeth?
Well, friends, you can get my book on Amazon. It's The Homesteader Mindset by Elizabeth Bruckner, or anywhere else you can get books. And I do have a free gift for your listeners. So I've created a homesteader habit tracker, and it also has 3 or 4 steps for how to create easy, simple, doable routines, because I think sometimes we kind of bite off more than we can chew. And you can receive that on my website by going to www.createwellnessproject.com/gift, GIFT.
Beautiful. And I'll make sure to include that in the show notes as well. So if anyone's listening and got to the end, you get a free gift. Look at that. Well done.
Yay!
Woohoo. Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth. This has been a delight. I love meeting kindred spirits. It's always fun. And I really appreciate you sharing your homesteader journey and how it's played out in your life.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you for listening to Willow Healing Matters, the podcast. We have so much love and gratitude that you have taken the time out of your day to empower you on your healing journey. The views shared by the person being interviewed might not necessarily reflect that of the host and should be used at your own discernment. Trust what resonates for you and follow your heart and soul guidance. If you have any underlying medical conditions or mental health issues, please consult with your healthcare provider before pursuing any of the recommendations. Likewise, you can always contact the person being interviewed to find out more information. This can be found in the show notes. Remember to activate, align, heal, empower, and find love in everything that you do.